I found out my parents funded my sister's secret family for years, while ignoring. My name is Miriam, I am 35 years old, and I never thought I would be telling this story without my son Ethan by my side. He was only 8 when I lost him to an illness that could have been treated if we had the money. Money my parents had all along, but chose to give to my sister Sarah instead. They funded her secret family for years while watching my son die. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and how I found healing in the most unexpected places. I grew up in a comfortable middle-class home in suburban Minnesota. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family, but inside our walls, there was always an unspoken hierarchy. My sister Sarah, 3 years younger than me, was the golden child despite her constant troubles. I was the responsible one, the achiever, the one who made straight A's and volunteered at the local hospital every weekend because I dreamed of becoming a nurse. When Sarah would get caught skipping school or coming home past curfew, my parents would rush to her defense. "She is just expressing herself," they would say. "Miriam, why can't you be more understanding of your sister?" Meanwhile, if I got an A- instead of an A, my father would raise his eyebrows and ask if I was slipping. This dynamic followed us from childhood through our teenage years, creating a distance between Sarah and me that I could never quite bridge, no matter how hard I tried. Despite the obvious favoritism I pushed forward, I earned a scholarship to nursing school and felt proud when my acceptance letter arrived. My parents acknowledged it with a quick, "That's nice, dear," before turning their attention back to Sarah, who had just been kicked out of her third college program for failing to attend classes. Somehow this resulted in them buying her a car to help her get back on her feet. It was at nursing school that I met Jason. He was studying to become a physical therapist with kind eyes and a laugh that made me feel truly seen for the first time. We connected instantly over our shared passion for healthcare and helping others. After 6 months of dating, I found myself pregnant. It wasn't planned, but when I told Jason, he held me close and said, "We'll figure this out together." For a moment, everything felt right. We made plans to get married before the baby came. Nothing fancy, just something small with family and close friends. When I told my parents about the pregnancy and our engagement, their reaction was ice cold. "How could you be so irresponsible, Miriam?" my mother had asked, as if I were 16 instead of 27. "What will people think?" They insisted on meeting Jason and his family properly before any wedding plans proceeded. During that disaster of a dinner, my father grilled Jason about his finances, his family background, his 5-year plan. Nothing Jason said seemed good enough. After that night, I noticed Jason becoming distant, taking longer to return my calls, making excuses to postpone wedding planning. 3 months into my pregnancy, Jason called to tell me he couldn't do this after all. "Your parents are right," he said. "I am not ready to be a father or a husband. I am sorry, Miriam." Just like that, he was gone, leaving me to face parenthood alone. When I called my parents crying, my father said, "We told you he wasn't good enough. You should have listened." Despite their disapproval, I was determined to create a loving home for my child. I finished my nursing degree with a pregnant belly, walking across the stage to receive my diploma when I was 8 months along. My parents attended the graduation, but left early, not bothering to take photos or celebrate with me afterward. When Ethan was born, it was the most profound moment of my life. Holding his tiny body against mine, I promised him I would give him all the love and support he deserved, even if it came from just one parent instead of two. My parents visited briefly at the hospital, holding Ethan awkwardly, as if he might break, or worse, as if he were somehow tainted by the circumstances of his birth. The contrast between how they treated Ethan and how they celebrated Sarah's achievements was striking. When Sarah got a promotion at the marketing firm where she worked, they threw her an elaborate dinner party. When Ethan said his first word or took his first steps, they responded to my excited phone calls with distracted, "That's nice, dear," comments before changing the subject. Despite their indifference, I created a stable, loving home for Ethan. I secured a position as a pediatric nurse at the local hospital, arranged for reliable childcare, and somehow managed to balance the demanding schedule of a healthcare worker with the needs of a growing child. Our modest two-bedroom house became a haven filled with dinosaur figures, picture books, and the art projects Ethan loved to create. Ethan was the light of my life from the start. Bright-eyed and curious about everything, he filled our home with laughter and questions. Why is the sky blue, Mommy? How do birds know which way is south? By the time he was 5, he had declared he wanted to be a doctor, to make sick children better. His empathy was remarkable for a child so young. Once, when he was 6, he gave his favorite dinosaur toy to a crying child in the hospital waiting room. "He needs it more than me right now," he had explained with a shrug. Balancing work and single motherhood wasn't easy. There were nights when I would collapse into bed after a 12-hour shift, only to be woken by Ethan's nightmares or a sudden fever. There were mornings when I had to drag myself out of bed after just a few hours of sleep, to pack Ethan's lunch and get him ready for school before rushing to the hospital for an early shift. My parents rarely visited us. When they did, they seemed uncomfortable in our home, making comments about the modest furnishings or the toys scattered about. They never offered to babysit or help when I was struggling. Meanwhile, they would drop everything to help Sarah when she called with some new crisis. Our family gatherings became increasingly rare and tense, with Ethan sensing the underlying dynamics, despite my efforts to shield him. "Why doesn't Grandma hug me like she hugs Aunt Sarah?" he asked once after a particularly strained Christmas dinner. I had no good answer for him. Ethan was 6 years old when I first noticed something was wrong. He had always been an energetic child, running rather than walking, chattering nonstop about dinosaurs in space. But suddenly he was taking naps after school, something he had stopped doing years earlier. I noticed bruises on his legs and arms that he couldn't explain. "I don't remember bumping into anything, Mommy," he said with a confused look when I asked about a particularly large bruise on his shin. As a pediatric nurse, alarm bells were ringing in my head. I took him to his pediatrician, who ordered blood tests after a thorough examination. The call came while I was at work, and I still remember stepping into the empty break room, my heart pounding as I listened to the doctor's carefully measured words. "Miriam, Ethan's blood work shows some concerning abnormalities. I would like to refer you to a hematologist at Children's Hospital as soon as possible." The next few days passed in a blur of specialists, more blood tests, and finally a bone marrow biopsy that confirmed our worst fears. Ethan had a rare blood disorder that would require extensive treatment, including chemotherapy, possible radiation, and potentially a bone marrow transplant. Without treatment, the specialist explained Ethan's condition would progressively worsen. With treatment, he had a 65% chance of full recovery. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot after that appointment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, allowing myself 10 minutes of breakdown before I had to go pick up Ethan from the hospital playroom, where a child life specialist was keeping him occupied. I screamed and pounded the dashboard, sobbing until my throat was raw. Then I wiped my face, reapplied my lip gloss, and went to get my son, determined that he would see only my strength, not my fear. That night, after tucking Ethan into bed with extra stories and cuddles, I sat at my kitchen table with a stack of insurance paperwork and felt my stomach sink. My insurance would cover 70% of the treatments, but the remaining 30% plus deductibles and out-of-network specialists would amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars. As a single mother with a modest nursing salary and student loans, still to pay off the numbers were impossible. I picked up extra shifts whenever possible, working nights when Ethan was asleep, and a trusted neighbor could stay at our house. I started selling anything I could spare, furniture, jewelry, even my car, downgrading to an older model to free up some cash. But as the bills mounted, and Ethan's condition required more intense treatment, I realized I was fighting a losing battle. After a particularly rough week where Ethan had severe reactions to his chemotherapy, and I had to take unpaid time off work to care for him, I made the difficult decision to ask my parents for help. They had never offered, despite knowing about Ethan's diagnosis, but I hoped that, faced with the reality of their grandson's illness, they would step up. I drove to their house on a Sunday afternoon, leaving Ethan with a friend, so he wouldn't have to witness what I feared might be an uncomfortable conversation. My parents' house was as immaculate as always, with not a cushion out of place in their formal living room, where we sat awkwardly with cups of tea I didn't want. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you about Ethan." I began hating how my voice trembled. His treatments are extremely expensive, and insurance doesn't cover everything. I have been picking up extra shifts and selling what I can, but it is not enough. I need help. My father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Well, Miriam, you know we are approaching retirement age. We have to be very careful with our finances at this stage of life. My mother nodded. We wish we could help, but we simply cannot afford to jeopardize our retirement plans. Surely the hospital has some sort of payment plan or charity care. I stared at them, taking in their designer clothes, the new furniture. They had just purchased the brochures for a European cruise lying on the coffee table. This is Ethan's life we are talking about, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Your grandson. He needs specialized treatment, and without it, he could die. How can your retirement plans possibly be more important than that? My father's face hardened. Do not take that tone with us, Miriam. We are not responsible for the situation you put yourself in. Having a child on your own was your choice. I left their house in tears, driving around aimlessly for an hour before I could compose myself enough to pick up Ethan. That evening, my sister Sarah called, her voice full of practiced sympathy. Mom told me about your visit, she said. I am so sorry they were not more helpful. If I had any money to spare, you know I would help out. I thought about Sarah's designer handbags, her frequent social media posts from expensive restaurants, her luxury apartment, but I was too exhausted to call her out on her hollow offer. Thanks for calling, I said flatly before hanging up. As the weeks passed, Ethan's condition worsened. The initial treatments weren't as effective as the doctors had hoped, and his blood counts remained dangerously low. His once boundless energy was gone, replaced by a fragility that broke my heart. But his spirit remained undiminished. When I get better, he would tell me, his voice weak but his eyes bright. I am going to be a doctor who makes medicine that doesn't make kids feel so sick. His doctor recommended a specialized treatment protocol available at a medical center 3 states away. This treatment had shown promising results for cases like Ethan's, but it would mean relocating for at least 6 months, and costs that made my previous medical bills look modest in comparison. When I received the estimate for this treatment, I felt the floor drop out from under me. Even if I sold our house, I couldn't come close to affording it. In desperation, I approached my parents again, this time bringing detailed information about the treatment and its success rates. This could save Ethan's life, I pleaded. I would not ask if there were any other way. My mother sighed, looking at the brochures I had brought without really seeing them. Miriam, we went over this. We simply cannot afford to give you this kind of money. Have you looked into government assistance programs? I have explored every option, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Ethan doesn't qualify for many programs because my income is just above the cutoff limits, but nowhere near enough to pay for this treatment. My father shook his head. Perhaps you should accept that you have done everything you can. Sometimes these things are just meant to be. I left their house shaking with rage and grief. How could they speak so callously about their own grandson's life? How could they dismiss his suffering as meant to be while planning luxury vacations, with no help from my family? I turned to the community. I started a crowdfunding campaign, reached out to local charities, and applied for every hardship program I could find. Colleagues at the hospital organized fundraisers, and Ethan's school held a walkathon in his honor. The support was overwhelming and humbling, but still fell far short of what we needed for the specialized treatment. Through it all, Ethan faced his illness with a courage that astounded me. Even on his worst days, when the treatments left him vomiting and too weak to stand, he would find a smile for me. Don't worry so much, Mommy, he would say, his small hand patting mine. I am tough, remember. And he was tougher than any 7-year-old should ever have to be. As Ethan's illness progressed into his 7th year, the complications from his treatments became more severe. Each hospital admission seemed longer than the last, with briefer periods at home in between. I had to reduce my work hours significantly, which only added to our financial strain. The mortgage on our small house fell behind, and I started receiving foreclosure warnings that I hid in my bedroom drawer away from Ethan's curious eyes. The battle with the insurance company became a part-time job in itself. Every new treatment or specialist consultation seemed to trigger a denial that I would have to appeal. I spent hours on the phone being transferred from one department to another, fighting for coverage that should have been automatic. During one particularly frustrating call, I broke down in tears when the representative coldly informed me that a crucial medication for Ethan had been denied as not medically necessary, despite his doctor's insistence that it was essential. "How dare you sit in some office and decide what is necessary for my son?" I had shouted into the phone. "Do you want to come to the hospital and explain to him why he can't have the medicine that might save his life?" The representative had simply repeated the company policy in the same detached voice, and I had hung up feeling defeated and more alone than ever. My parents visited Ethan in the hospital exactly twice during that year. Each visit lasted less than an hour, with my mother wincing at the medical equipment and my father checking his watch repeatedly. They brought impersonal gifts, store-bought stuffed animals or books clearly chosen with no knowledge of Ethan's interests. They never stayed long enough to speak with his doctors or understand the complexity of his condition. Sarah was even more distant, sending the occasional text, asking how things were going, but never once visiting her nephew in the hospital. "Hospitals make me uncomfortable," she explained when I confronted her about it. "Besides, I am really swamped at work right now. You know how it is." The contrast between my family's indifference and the compassion of strangers was stark. One of the hospital janitors, an older man named Frank, would go out of his way to stop by Ethan's room during his shifts, sometimes bringing small origami creatures he had learned to make for the pediatric patients. "Today's special is a T-Rex," he would announce, presenting Ethan with a paper dinosaur that would make my son's face light up in delight. The nurses on Ethan's floor became like family, bringing extra blankets, without being asked when they noticed me sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, slipping me containers of cafeteria food when I forgot to eat, sitting with Ethan for a few minutes so I could shower or make necessary phone calls. A temporary reprieve came when Ethan was accepted into a hospital charity program that covered some of his treatments for a 3-month period. During those months, his condition stabilized slightly, giving us both a dangerous sense of hope. His blood counts improved enough for us to spend 2 precious weeks at home, where we built a blanket fort in the living room and had a movie marathon of all his favorite films. Seeing him laugh and eat ice cream on our worn couch, I could almost pretend that things were going to be okay. But the improvement was short-lived. Just after Ethan turned 8, his symptoms returned with a vengeance. Infections that his weakened immune system couldn't fight took hold, requiring stronger antibiotics that wreaked havoc on his already fragile body. The brief energy he had regained disappeared, and he began sleeping for longer periods, his small body fighting a battle that grew more difficult each day. Despite everything, we celebrated his 8th birthday in the hospital with as much festivity as I could muster. The pediatric ward staff decorated his room with dinosaur-themed banners and balloons. His favorite nurse, Jenna, brought cupcakes she had baked herself, making sure to include the green frosting that Ethan loved. My coworkers from the hospital's pediatric unit, many of whom had cared for Ethan during his admissions, stopped by throughout the day with small gifts and cards. My parents sent a generic birthday card with a $20 bill inside, but didn't visit. The card was signed "Love Grandma and Grandpa," in my mother's neat handwriting with no personal message. When I called to let them know about the small celebration, my mother claimed they had a neighborhood association meeting they couldn't miss. It was the day after his birthday, when Dr. Martinez, Ethan's primary oncologist, asked to speak with me privately. We stepped into a small consultation room off the pediatric ward, and as soon as I saw her face, I knew the news wasn't good. "Miriam, Ethan's condition is progressing faster than we had anticipated," she said gently. "The current treatment protocol isn't working as we'd hoped." I gripped the edge of the chair I was sitting in, my knuckles turning white. "What are our options?" Dr. Martinez explained that there was an experimental treatment that had shown promising results in cases similar to Ethan's. It involved a specialized form of immunotherapy, combined with targeted genetic treatment available through a clinical trial at a renowned children's research hospital in Boston. "This could give Ethan a fighting chance," she said. "But I have to be honest with you about 2 things. First, it's incredibly expensive, and because it's still experimental, insurance won't cover it. We're talking about costs in the range of $500,000. Second, we need to act quickly. Given the progression we're seeing, Ethan doesn't have much time. I felt the room spin around me as the magnitude of what she was saying sank in. $500,000 might as well have been $5 million. It was an impossible sum. But how could I not try everything possible to save my son? I will find a way, I told Dr. Martinez with far more confidence than I felt. Whatever it takes. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, his small hand clutching his favorite dinosaur toy, I made the call I had been dreading. My father answered on the third ring, his voice wary when he realized it was me. "Dad, I need to talk to you and Mom about Ethan," I said, cutting off his attempt at small talk. "It is urgent. Can you put the phone on speaker?" I explained the situation as clearly and calmly as I could, detailing the experimental treatment, its costs, and Ethan's increasingly dire prognosis without it. This is his last chance. I concluded, my voice finally breaking. "Please, I am begging you, help me save your grandson." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity before my father cleared his throat. "Miriam, we understand this is difficult, but you need to be realistic. That amount of money would completely deplete our retirement savings. We are not in a position to gamble our financial security on an experimental treatment that might not even work." "Gamble?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm for Ethan's sake. "This is not a gamble. This is Ethan's life. We are truly sorry." My mother interjected, her voice carrying that familiar note of finality. "But our decision is final. Perhaps it is time to focus on making Ethan comfortable rather than putting him through more treatments." After hanging up, I broke down completely, sliding down the wall of the hospital bathroom, where I had taken the call, sobbing silently into my hands until I had no tears left. When I finally composed myself and returned to Ethan's room, I found him awake, his eyes large and solemn in his pale face. "It is okay, Mommy," he whispered, reaching for my hand. "I know I might go to heaven soon. I just want you to be okay when I do." I climbed into the narrow hospital bed beside him, holding him close, promising him that everything would be all right, even as my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. The days following Dr. Martinez's devastating news and my parents' final refusal were a blur of desperate activity. I took an unpaid leave from work, unable to tear myself away from Ethan's bedside as his condition rapidly deteriorated. His once bright eyes became sunken, his skin taking on a yellowish pallor that no amount of medical intervention seemed to improve. Each breath became a visible effort, his small chest working harder than it should have to perform this basic function. I continued researching alternatives, reaching out to every foundation and charity I could find. But the responses were all variations on the same theme. Waitlists were long, funds were limited, criteria were strict. Time was the one thing Ethan didn't have, and it was slipping away with each passing hour. On a Tuesday morning, as Ethan slept fitfully, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Thomas Greenfield, my parents' attorney. His voice professionally detached as he explained that there were some tax documents requiring my signature related to a family trust my grandparents had established years ago. "It is rather urgent, I'm afraid," he said. "The paperwork needs to be filed by the end of the week." I explained that I couldn't leave Ethan, but Thomas insisted the documents couldn't be sent electronically due to legal requirements. "Perhaps while he is resting, you could stop by your parents' house where I have left the paperwork," he suggested. "It would take no more than 15 minutes of your time." I was reluctant to leave Ethan for even a moment, but the hospital was short-staffed that day, and Jenna, his favorite nurse, promised to sit with him. "He is stable right now," she assured me. "Go take care of this and come back. I will call you if anything changes." With a heavy heart, I drove to my parents' house using the spare key they had given me years ago when I let myself in. The house was empty, my parents at some social event, according to the note they had left for me on the kitchen counter. The tax documents were supposed to be on my father's desk in his home office, but when I entered the meticulously organized room, I couldn't find anything with my name on it. I began opening drawers, searching for the paperwork Thomas had mentioned. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, I found a folder labeled Sarah Supplemental that I mistook for Sarah's Educational, thinking it might contain information about the family trust since Sarah had received money for her multiple attempts at college. What I found inside stopped my heart. The folder contained years of bank statements showing monthly transfers to Sarah labeled family support. The amounts were staggering, between $3,000 and $5,000 every month for the past 6 years. There were copies of checks for down payments on a house private school tuition for 2 children and vacation expenses. But it was the photographs that truly destroyed me. Tucked inside the folder were family photos of Sarah with a man I had never seen, and 2 children, a boy who looked about 5, and a girl who appeared to be 3. My sister, who had always claimed to be happily single and focused on her career, had a husband and children, a secret family that my parents had been funding generously for years. With shaking hands, I continued to sift through the documents, finding records of a house purchase in Sarah's name 3 years earlier, a $500,000 transaction that my parents had funded entirely. There were receipts for furniture, appliances, even a family vacation to Disney World the previous summer. The total amount my parents had given Sarah during the same period they had refused to help Ethan exceeded $700,000. I sat at my father's desk, the evidence of their betrayal spread out before me, feeling as though I had been physically struck. The family house phone rang, startling me from my shock. On autopilot, I answered it. "Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson." It was Thomas Greenfield. I wanted to make sure Miriam found the documents. "Thomas, there are no tax documents here," I said, my voice eerily calm, despite the storm raging inside me. "But I found something else. I found evidence that my parents have been supporting my sister's secret family while refusing to help pay for treatments that could save my son's life." There was a long silence before Thomas cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I see," he said finally. "I believe there has been some misunderstanding. Perhaps you should discuss this with your parents directly." "Oh, I intend to," I assured him before hanging up. I gathered the most damning documents and photographs, placing them in my bag just as I heard the front door open. My parents' voices drifted down the hallway, sounding relaxed and happy, in a way I hadn't heard them sound around me in years. They froze when they saw me standing in the doorway of my father's office, their expression shifting quickly from surprise to wariness. "Miriam, what are you doing here?" my mother asked. "Where is Ethan?" "Ethan is dying in the hospital," I said flatly, "while you two have been funding Sarah's secret life to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars." My father's face hardened. "You had no right to go through my private papers." I laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "That is your response. I discover that you have been lying to me for years, watching my son suffer, while funneling money to Sarah for her secret husband and children. And you are concerned about your privacy." "It is not what you think," my mother began, but I cut her off. "Then what is it? Explain to me how you could tell me you couldn't afford to help save your grandson's life while buying Sarah a house and paying for private school for her kids I didn't even know existed." They exchanged a glance, a familiar silent communication that had always excluded me. Finally, my father sighed. "Sarah's situation is different. She needed more help. She was protecting her privacy because of her husband's family situation. It is complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, my voice rising. "What is complicated about choosing to save a child's life? What is complicated about being honest with your daughter? What possible justification could you have for this level of deception and cruelty?" "You have always been the strong one, Miriam," my mother said, as if this explained everything. "Sarah is more fragile. She needs more support. And Ethan? What is he in this equation? Just collateral damage in your obvious favoritism." "That is not fair," my father protested. "We love Ethan, but these are different situations." "Different how? Different because he is my son and not Sarah's. Different because you have always loved her more than me. Different because you somehow decided his life was worth less than her comfort." The argument escalated, years of resentment and pain pouring out as I confronted them with the evidence of their betrayal. My mother began crying. My father's face reddened with anger, but I felt nothing for either of them. All I could see was Ethan's face growing thinner and paler each day. While Sarah's children, my niece and nephew I had never met, enjoyed private schools and Disney vacations funded by the same parents who had refused to help save my son. In the midst of this confrontation, my phone rang. It was Jenna from the hospital, her voice tight with urgency. "Miriam, you need to come back now. Ethan's condition has destabilized. The doctors are with him, but you should be here." I left my parents standing in their perfect living room, my mother calling after me as I rushed to my car. The 20-minute drive to the hospital was the longest of my life, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I alternated between desperate prayers and blind rage at my family's betrayal. But I was too late. When I arrived at Ethan's room, Dr. Martinez met me in the doorway, her face telling me everything before she said a word. "I am so sorry, Miriam." We did everything we could, but Ethan's body was too weakened from the disease. He went peacefully just a few minutes ago. The world stopped spinning. I pushed past her into the room where my beautiful boy lay still in the hospital bed, the machines that had been keeping him alive now silent. His face looked peaceful, almost as if he were sleeping, but the absence of his chest rising and falling told the truth. My heart couldn't accept. I collapsed beside his bed, gathering his small body in my arms, rocking him as I had when he was a baby. My grief beyond tears, beyond screams, beyond anything I had words to describe. All I could think in the small part of my mind still capable of coherent thought was that the money my parents had given Sarah could have saved him. The experimental treatment that might have given him a chance had been within their power to provide, and they had chosen not to. My son was gone, and the knowledge that his death could have been prevented destroyed something fundamental inside me that I knew would never heal. The days after Ethan's death passed in a fog of unbearable grief. Somehow I went through the motions of planning a funeral, accepting condolences, signing paperwork, all while feeling completely disconnected from my body and the world around me. My parents attended the funeral service, standing stiffly at the back of the small chapel, their faces appropriately solemn. They approached me afterward, my mother attempting to hug me, but I stepped back, unable to bear their touch. "We are so sorry, Miriam," my father said, his voice heavy. "If there is anything we can do." "There was something you could have done," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "But it is too late now." Sarah did not attend the funeral, sending a generic sympathy arrangement with a card expressing her deepest condolences for your loss, as if Ethan had been a distant acquaintance rather than her nephew. In the weeks that followed, I could barely function. The house was unbearably empty without Ethan's presence. I would wake in the night thinking I heard his voice calling for me, only to remember anew that he was gone. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to face returning to the hospital, where he had spent so much of his short life, where I had failed to save him despite my medical training and desperate efforts. Depression enveloped me like a heavy blanket, making even the simplest tasks seem insurmountable. Some days I couldn't find the energy to get out of bed or eat a proper meal. Other days I would sit in Ethan's room for hours, surrounded by his dinosaur collection and space-themed bedding, trying to feel some connection to him. The medical bills continued to arrive, a cruel reminder of the battle we had fought and lost. One afternoon, as I sat at my kitchen table staring blankly at a new stack of invoices, my phone rang. It was Hannah, a financial counselor from the hospital. "Miriam, I wanted to let you know that an anonymous donation has been made to cover all of Ethan's outstanding medical expenses," she said, her voice gentle. "The donor requested complete anonymity, but they wanted you to know that the bills have been paid in full." I felt the first stirring of emotion I had experienced in weeks, a mix of gratitude and bitter irony. "Thank you for telling me," I managed to say before ending the call. My investigative instincts, dulled by grief but still present, prompted me to find out who had made the donation. After several calls and a visit to the hospital's financial department, where an old colleague slipped me information she technically shouldn't have, I discovered the truth: my parents had made the donation. The knowledge brought no comfort. They had paid Ethan's bills when it no longer mattered, when it couldn't save him or ease his suffering. It felt like an attempt to buy absolution, to erase their guilt with money that had come too late. A week later, Sarah called, her voice unusually subdued. "Miriam, we need to talk. Can I come over tomorrow?" I agreed, not out of any desire to see her, but because the confrontation felt inevitable. When she arrived at my house the next day, I was struck by how different she looked from her social media photos. Her face drawn and her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. "I am so sorry about Ethan," she began, as we sat in my living room, the dinosaur drawings on the refrigerator visible from where we sat. "And I am sorry for not coming to the funeral. I just couldn't face you." "Because you knew about the money," I said flatly. It wasn't a question. Sarah's eyes widened. "You know, I found the documents at Mom and Dad's house. I know everything, Sarah. The secret husband, the children, the house, the vacations, all of it. Everything they gave you while my son died because they claimed they couldn't afford to help him." Sarah's face crumpled. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. You weren't supposed to find out not like this. I wasn't supposed to find out at all, was I? How long were you planning to keep your entire life a secret from me?" Through tears, Sarah revealed the full story. She had met her husband Daniel 6 years earlier. He was divorced with significant debt from his previous marriage, which had made my parents disapprove of the relationship. Rather than stand up to them, Sarah had concocted an elaborate deception, pretending to be single, while secretly marrying Daniel and starting a family with him. "Mom and Dad thought they were helping me as a single woman building my career," she explained. "I never told them directly that I was raising the kids alone, but I let them believe it. When they offered money, I took it." "And you didn't think to correct them when they were giving you hundreds of thousands of dollars under false pretenses?" I asked incredulously. "You didn't think to say, 'Actually, I am married and doing fine, maybe help Miriam's dying son instead?' I didn't know how bad things were with Ethan," she protested weakly. "You always seemed so in control, so capable. I told you how bad it was. I told all of you I begged for help while you were cashing checks for private schools and Disney vacations." Sarah looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Daniel didn't know either," she whispered. "He thought the money was from a trust fund I had. When he found out the truth after your confrontation with Mom and Dad, he was horrified. He is the one who made me come here today." The revelation that Sarah had been lying not only to me but to her own husband added another layer to the betrayal. "So you manipulated everyone," I said. "Mom, Dad, your husband, me, all to keep the money flowing." "It wasn't like that," she insisted. "It just happened, and then I couldn't figure out how to stop it without everyone hating me. And now everyone hates you anyway, and my son is dead." Sarah broke down completely, then sobbing apologies that meant nothing to me. As she cried, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Miriam Wilson?" a man's voice asked when I answered. "This is Daniel, Sarah's husband. I wanted to reach out to you directly. What Sarah and your parents did was unforgivable. I had no idea where the money was coming from or what was being withheld from your son. I am so, so sorry." The sincerity in his voice, the genuine horror at what had been done in part to benefit his family, touched something in me that Sarah's tears could not. We spoke briefly, and he promised to call again to find some way to make amends, even while acknowledging nothing could ever be enough. After I hung up, Sarah was watching me, her face a mess of tears and makeup. "Is Daniel going to leave me?" she asked, her voice small. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But it seems like he is a better person than you gave him credit for." In the days that followed, I learned that Daniel had indeed separated from Sarah, taking their children to stay with his parents, while he processed the magnitude of her deception. He had also been the one to inform the extended family about the situation, resulting in a wave of calls and messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins who had been kept in the dark about both Sarah's secret life and Ethan's illness. My parents attempted to justify their actions to the family, claiming they hadn't realized how serious Ethan's condition was and that they had been manipulated by Sarah. Few were convinced by these excuses. My mother's sister, Aunt Judith, who had always been kind to me, called to express her horror and to let me know she had canceled her annual vacation with my parents for the first time in 20 years. "What they did is unconscionable," she told me. "I cannot pretend everything is normal after this." The family fracture brought me no satisfaction, just a hollow confirmation that the betrayal had been as profound as I felt it to be. As weeks turned to months after Ethan's death, my grief began to transform. The paralyzing sorrow remained, but alongside it grew a determination that Ethan's short life and unnecessary death would not be without meaning. The injustice he had suffered became a fuel for action, rather than just a source of pain. My first step was consulting with a lawyer about the possibility of legal action against Sarah for what essentially amounted to fraud against my parents. The consultation was more cathartic than practical, as the attorney explained that while what Sarah had done was deeply unethical, proving fraud in a family financial matter would be difficult and expensive. "The real issue here isn't legal, it is moral," she told me gently. "No court judgment can give you what you truly want, which is justice for your son." Her words, though difficult to hear, helped redirect my energy toward a more productive channel. With the help of several colleagues from the hospital, I established the Ethan Wilson Foundation, dedicated to providing financial assistance to families facing catastrophic childhood medical expenses. I used the small life insurance policy I had maintained for Ethan as seed money, supplemented by donations from friends, colleagues, and community members who had followed our story. The foundation's mission was simple but vital. No family should lose a child because they cannot afford treatment. While working on establishing the foundation, I finally gathered the courage to confront my parents directly, not in the heat of discovery as before, but with the clear-eyed purpose of demanding accountability. I arranged to meet them at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop halfway between our homes. My father began with practiced contrition. "Miriam, we want to apologize for what happened. We never intended for things to turn out this way." "What exactly did you intend?" I asked, my voice steady. "Did you intend to favor Sarah so dramatically that your grandson would die while you funded private schools for her children? Or did you just not care enough to think about the consequences?" "That is unfair," my mother protested. "We loved Ethan. We would never have wanted him to suffer. But you were willing to let him suffer rather than inconvenience yourselves or disappoint Sarah," I countered. "Your actions showed your priorities very clearly." As the conversation continued, the defensive facade my parents had maintained began to crack. For perhaps the first time, they were forced to confront the reality of what they had done, not as an abstract mistake, but as a direct contribution to the death of their grandson. "We should have helped him," my father admitted finally, his voice breaking. "We had the means and we chose not to. I don't know how to live with that." "Neither do I told him honestly. "I have to live every day knowing Ethan might be alive if you had made a different choice. That is my burden because of your actions." By the end of our meeting, no real resolution had been reached, but something had shifted. My parents' carefully constructed justifications had collapsed, leaving them facing the truth of their failure, not just as grandparents, but as human beings. Sarah's life was unraveling in the aftermath of her exposed deception. Daniel filed for separation, though not immediate divorce, insisting on family counseling before making any final decisions about their marriage. My parents cut off the financial support they had been providing, forcing Sarah to face financial realities for perhaps the first time in her adult life. When Sarah called me alternating between self-pity and seemingly genuine remorse, I maintained firm boundaries. "I cannot be your emotional support through this, Sarah. You need to work through your issues with a therapist, not with me." Meanwhile, the Ethan Wilson Foundation was gaining momentum. A local news station ran a story about our mission featuring photographs of Ethan and interviews with doctors who had treated him. The response was overwhelming, with donations pouring in from around the state. Within 6 months, we were able to provide our first grant to a family whose daughter needed specialized treatment for a rare form of pediatric cancer. The treatment that had been out of reach was now possible, and the gratitude in the parents' eyes when I delivered the news gave me the first genuine sense of purpose I had felt since Ethan's death. I returned to work part-time in the pediatric oncology unit, finding that helping other children facing similar battles to Ethan's was both painful and healing. My colleagues welcomed me back with understanding and support, giving me space on difficult days and celebration on good ones. The story of what had happened to Ethan and the family betrayal that contributed to his death became something of a cautionary tale in our community. Without naming names, I shared aspects of our experience in an anonymous online forum for parents of children with serious illnesses. The post went viral, generating discussions about family obligations, medical costs, and the broken healthcare system that forces families into impossible situations. The attention brought more donations to the foundation, but also unwelcome contact from my parents, who recognized our story despite the anonymity and felt publicly shamed. "Did you have to expose family matters this way?" my mother asked during a tense phone call. "I didn't name anyone," I pointed out. "If you feel ashamed by an anonymous account of what happened, perhaps that is your conscience speaking, not me." Around the 9-month mark after Ethan's death, I received an unexpected letter from my parents' attorney. Opening it with trepidation, I discovered that my parents had rewritten their will, leaving the bulk of their estate to the Ethan Wilson Foundation, with smaller portions to me and to Sarah's children in trust funds that she could not access. The letter included a personal note from my parents, expressing their deep regret and acknowledging that no inheritance could make up for what had been lost. "We cannot undo the past," they wrote, "but we hope this will help other children receive the care that Ethan was denied." When Thomas Greenfield called to confirm I had received the documents, I told him my decision. "I appreciate the gesture, but I don't want or need their inheritance. The entire estate should go to the foundation." "Are you certain?" he asked. "This is a substantial amount of money." "I am certain," I replied. "No amount of money will bring Ethan back or erase what happened. But it might help save other children, and that is what matters now." The first major fundraising event for the foundation exceeded all expectations, raising over $300,000 in a single evening. A prominent children's hospital announced a partnership with us, creating a special fund for families falling through the cracks of the insurance system. As I stood at the podium that night sharing Ethan's story with a room full of donors, I felt his presence beside me, his courage infusing my words. No parent should have to choose between financial ruin and their child's life, I told the audience. No child should be denied treatment because of money. In Ethan's memory, we are changing the system that failed him one family at a time. The applause that followed felt like a vindication of sorts, not just for me, but for Ethan. His short life was making a difference for other children, creating ripples of change that might eventually lead to transformation. 1 year after Ethan's death, I stood at his grave in the children's section of Pine Grove Cemetery. I had brought his favorite dinosaurs, arranging them carefully around the simple headstone that read, "Ethan James Wilson, beloved son, forever 8." The morning was cool but sunny, the kind of day Ethan had loved for exploring outdoors. "I miss you every day, my brave boy," I whispered, tracing the letters of his name with my fingertips. "But I am trying to make you proud." The grief journey had been neither linear nor predictable. There were still mornings when I woke reaching for him, afternoons when I thought I heard his laugh from another room, nights when I cried myself to sleep clutching his favorite T-Rex. But alongside the pain, I had found a way forward, a path illuminated by Ethan's memory. In the year since his death, the Ethan Wilson Foundation had helped 15 families access life-saving treatments for their children. Each success story was both a triumph and a reminder of what might have been for Ethan, a complex mixture of joy and sorrow that I was slowly learning to navigate. I had moved from our small house 6 months earlier, unable to bear the emptiness of Ethan's room, yet equally unable to change it. The new apartment was in a different neighborhood close to the hospital, where I now worked 3 days a week in pediatric oncology and spent the remaining 2 days managing the foundation. My relationship with my family remained complicated. My parents continued their attempts at reconciliation, their approaches varying from awkward invitations to dinner to substantial donations to the foundation. I maintained polite but distant contact, accepting their contributions to the foundation, while keeping firm personal boundaries. "I don't hate you," I had told them during a brief visit 3 months earlier, "but I don't trust you, and I don't know if I ever will again." What happened wasn't a simple mistake. It was a series of choices that revealed your true priorities. I can forgive you for my own peace, but I can't forget or pretend everything is normal. Sarah's situation had evolved in unexpected ways. Her marriage to Daniel had survived, though transformed. After months of intensive therapy, both as a couple and individually, they had rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than deception. Daniel had reached out to me separately, becoming an unexpected ally, and eventually a volunteer for the foundation. Sarah herself had made halting attempts at genuine change. After losing the financial support from our parents, she had been forced to find actual employment rather than the part-time position she had maintained for appearances. The humbling experience of working retail while taking online classes to complete the degree she had abandoned years earlier had given her a perspective she had never had before. "I never understood what it meant to struggle until now," she admitted during one of our infrequent conversations. "I took so much for granted, and I can never undo the harm that caused." I had neither fully forgiven her nor shut her out completely, instead maintaining a careful distance that protected my healing while leaving room for possibility. Sarah's children, my niece and nephew, whom I had met properly for the first time 6 months after Ethan's death, were innocent in all this. Their excited chatter about their cousin in heaven was both painful and sweet, a reminder of the relationship Ethan would never have with them. Beyond my complicated family dynamics, I had found unexpected support in a group for parents who had lost children to illness. Meeting weekly in the hospital chapel, we shared our grief, our anger, our guilt, and occasionally our laughter as we remembered the children we had lost. These strangers turned friends understood what well-meaning others could not, the particular ache of outliving your child, the way that grief becomes not something you overcome, but something you learn to carry. Through the foundation work, I had also connected with doctors, researchers, and advocates, working to change the systems that had failed Ethan. Dr. Martinez had joined our advisory board, bringing her expertise and passion for reform to our efforts. Together, we had begun drafting what we called Ethan's Law, a proposed legislation that would create additional safeguards for children denied life-saving treatments due to financial constraints. As I sat by Ethan's grave that morning, I told him about all these developments, imagining his excited questions and thoughtful observations. I described the children we had helped, the families who sent photos and thank you cards, the doctors who volunteered their time to our cause. "Your life was too short, my love," I said softly, "but it mattered. You mattered. And you still do." Before leaving, I placed a small model of a Stegosaurus, Ethan's favorite dinosaur, at the base of his headstone. I had taken to bringing pieces of his collection to places we had planned to visit together, leaving his dinosaur footprints across the world. So far, Stegosauruses had made it to the Natural History Museum, the Grand Canyon, and the beach where we had planned to vacation the summer after his death. The process of rebuilding my life would never truly be complete. The absence of Ethan would always be a hollow space in my heart, a shadow across milestones he would never reach, birthdays he would never celebrate. But I had found a way to carry his memory forward, to transform the unbearable pain of his loss into purpose. True family isn't always about blood. I had told a young mother at the foundation's office the previous week, as she worried about the lack of support from her relatives. It is about who shows up, who stands by you, who loves without conditions or expectations. Sometimes we have to create our own family from the people who choose to walk beside us in our darkest hours. This hard-won wisdom had become my guiding truth. The colleagues who had donated sick days so I could be with Ethan, the neighbors who had brought meals and sat with me in silent support after his death, The strangers turned friends who understood my grief, the families connected through the foundation, even Daniel and his children, who had no obligation to me but chose connection anyway. These were my chosen family now. As I drove away from the cemetery that day, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The road ahead would never be the one I had planned to travel with Ethan by my side, but it was a path with meaning, with purpose, with the potential to create lasting change in his name. What would you do if you were in my situation? I often get asked this question. The truth is, I hope you never have to experience the loss of a child or the betrayal of those who should have protected them. But if my story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of family healing and finding purpose through pain. Share your thoughts in the comments about how you would handle family betrayal or what you would do to honor a loved one's memory. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that even in our darkest moments, we can find light if we keep moving forward.